IKIM is versi utama anda. Welcome back. I'm Batusha Afrina, and you're still tuning to a special interview. And in today's episode, I'm speaking with Mr. Jordi Serra del Pino, who is the Deputy Director of the Center for Postnormal Policy and Future Studies, on the topic preparing students for what we can't predict. So, Mr. Serra, we talk about the technology in the education system, right? And what I can conclude from that is that we should embrace it and not immediately block it, because it can deter, or it can, I would say, deter on how the education systems can develop. And going further into that, I would like to ask you about the current education system. What is your thought on the current education system? Are there any flaws that we need to highlight?
First of all, I would like to say that what I was trying to say is that we cannot expect that technology saves the day. I mean, there are many different kinds of technology. Even the way we arrange a classroom is also a technology. So in this regard, our teaching technology is very old. I mean, having the teacher in a slightly higher position,
Yes.
the students in the stalls in front of him, that has been working for centuries.
Yes.
Now we have newer things. So many things, when we talk about technology, we just think of computers and the likes. And they can be wonderful. So, for instance, the way you can use resources in the internet or in other places to enrich a presentation, that is wonderful. Because when I was a kid, the best thing we had were slides. And it was a little bit awkward because sometimes they got stuck in the projector and they got burned. So let's not, let's say, be overly critical, not overly hopeful. The important is what we use this technology for. And this probably it's one of the questions that right now we should consider with greater care and attention. So can we afford to make our children non-proficient in the use of technology? I don't think so. Because we live in a world where you need to be fluid in at least on some basic level.
Yes.
of using a technology. You need to be able to do certain things. You need to be able to find your way in the digital world. Because, for instance, every time is harder to interact with physical people when you have to do some bureaucratic procedure. Even, I don't know if it's here the case in Malaysia, I suspect it is, but in my country and most of Europe, if you go to a bank and ask for a credit, that decision is not going to be taken by a person. It will be an algorithm.
Yes.
So we need to understand how these things work, and that is something we need to do it as soon as possible. For me, the biggest flaw right now is that we do not have a well-defined or a good enough idea of what do we want education for. So what is the purpose of education? So is it to, if you listen to OCDE, they say very nice words, but if you read at the stuff and check PISA, they want to make professionals. People that can go out to the market and become proficient professionals that could deliver. Regardless if the fact of being proficient professionals makes them feeling more fulfilled or happy. If you look at certain, let's say, more humanistic approaches, they focus on the fact that they have to be self-centered and fulfill persons. But okay, these people cannot ignore the fact that if you cannot make ends meet and you find yourself struggling to survive, it's awfully difficult to be a self-fulfilled person. So these all positions should be discussed, and every society must find its own decision. In some places they may decide that it's necessary to reinforce the communal approach, that community should be brought more to the forefront. In other places they may decide that the solution is to provide the students with more instrumental skills so they can carry on and engage in lifelong learning, this kind of thing. But that must respond to a debate of the community. And again, and not to seem that we are promoting it because we've been involved, but I think that is one of the great strengths of Madani. Because if you put values to the forefront, that is something that forces you to agree on. So unless everyone is reasonably convinced that these values are important, it's difficult to move on. But if there's consensus on those values, as it is the case, because they represent to a great deal the identity of people in Malaysia, then the discussion is how do we put these values into practice. That leads to actions.
So I have to put the values first.
No, I mean, it's a way to do it. But for me, since these kind of things have to be agreed upon, I found that sometimes it's easier to agree on values than in other things. By that, I'm not saying that it is easy. I'm saying it is easier. there's a nuance there. So then you decide how to put those values into practice. So it's very nice to say that you are for sustainability or for compassion or for innovation, but let's walk your talk. But then there's a third level. You need to develop structures, institutions that uphold both the actions and the values. So education is one of those. So if we agree that kids should be given these contents, these values, then education becomes a tool to achieve it. And right now, I think that we are focusing too much on the how, on actions, too little on values, and too little on institutions. And I'm saying this because this is, I can assure you, what is happening in my country. So we have had, 6 education laws in 10 years or so. This is total, absolute nonsense. Because how can you say that the previous law has worked or not when you have not really given time to deliver? And then they begin to change many things, most of times for ideological reasons. Maybe we should talk a little bit how the school is becoming a battlefield for cultural wars. So then you engage in changes for ideological reasons, and you magically expect that it will produce the desired outcome. Well, this simply doesn't happen. So that's why I believe that if you manage to agree on a vision, on a goal, and you work with your organization, your community, your country, your village, or whatever, with some degree of agreement, the chances of being successful increase.
I see. And talking about the changes in the education system, of course we would like to create a system where it cater to the needs and also empower the students itself. So there's right now they're talking about how can we promote individualism, and also at the same time how can we foster a collective and also inclusive learning experience to the student. So in your own perspective, is it achievable?
I don't not only believe that it is achievable, I think it should be achievable. So individualism is a very Western feature, putting the individual at the center of everything. But nobody is an island.
Yes.
And the pretension that the measure of everything can be just the individual has also led to great wrongdoings. So we must acknowledge that there are certain things that only make sense at the communitary level. So cultures are built by community.
Yes.
Languages are spoken by communities.
Yes.
History and shared identity are done by communities. So it is another thing that you give every person the possibility to live that community if feels that that community is oppressing. That I think it's in this regard the capacity of the individual to uphold certain values, certain rights. I'm okay with that, but we cannot forget that we are social beings.
Yes.
We make sense of ourselves living with other people, and for better or for worse, we share a planet that it's not in a very good shape right now, and there's no saving just some of us. So this is something that I thought some people learned during COVID, because, I mean, there's no point in just giving vaccines to a few. If the whole community doesn't develop protection, that the fact that you are vaccinated, it only provides limited protection. So there are certain ailments in this world that should be corrected at the global level. Because if nothing else, there's not planet B. So I think that it is important that students are given the opportunity to develop their own personality. That I think it's positive, because not everybody likes the same.
True.
And that should be respected. I see a strength and value in diversity. But individualism taken too far, it becomes a sterile ground for many things. So and as I said, I mean, one of the most rewarding things for humans is to engage with other humans and help each other.
Yes.
And we like to interact. So when I was young, we were told that with technology we could work from home and we would be very happy. Well, it has happened the opposite. Work has got into our home and we are not so happy. Because one of the things we learned, particularly during confinement, is that we like to interact.
Yes.
So going to work is not just a means to get a salary, it's also a possibility to interact with a totally different kind of people. This may be a silly example, but my daughter was working for a while in a shop. It was a terrible job. The conditions were very bad, but she stayed longer because she liked very much her workmate. With some of them, she, even though she has left, she keeps contact because she really liked. Most of them were girls, and she really liked being with them. And that for me, it's a very nice example that working is not just a way to get salary, that working from home in front of your computer all day long is not for everyone.
Yes.
And that interacting with other people is, at the end of the day, essential for us.
And it's very interesting to listen to. And talking about, and so far we have been talking about the students and also the education system itself, but we also need to remember about the educators, because they are the one who are struggling, and how can they deliver, or how can they educate this young generation. So from your own perspective, how can we empower these educators on becoming the leaders of the change in post-normal times education, and how can we ensure that they have the right and also enough resources, the support, and also the training needed?
Well, actually, it's not a very good moment for teachers and professors all over the world. So UNESCO, the UN organization that works on culture and education, has not, well, quite recently, I would say, I forgot the year, published a report that deals with a trend they have spot. There's a growing shortage of teachers and professors.
Shortage of teacher.
Yeah. They estimate that by 2030 there will be a shortage of 44 million educators all over the world. In some places more than others. One of the reasons is because attrition, so let's say the cost of teaching has gone it has doubled. So the number of teachers and professors that simply burn out has increased a lot.
Burned out.
Yeah. So, and one of the reasons for that is because teachers have lost a lot of social perception. They used to be very respected figures, not so much these days.
Yes.
So this example I use frequently. Some years ago, there's that NBA basketball American player, Kyrie Irving, not a very bright person, let it be said, that simply said that the earth was flat, that was obvious, and shouldn't be a need to explain it. That resulted in many science professors all over the United States struggling with their students, because the students believe more a player that is skillful, but it's over someone that has studied these things. So that is quite unprecedented in many senses. And then what is happening in many countries, particularly in Europe, is France, for instance, is that the more the teachers are on the spot, the more the administration is trying to protect them in the wrong way. The ancient Romans, I'm Mediterranean, so what can I say? They are my reference. They used to distinguish between potestas and autoritas. Potestas was the power that was in the office. So if you are a teacher, that could invest you with certain power. That was the potestas. And as with the potestas, you could, as we can do professors today, we can fail a student. If we believe that a student has misbehaved, we can expel. So we have certain capacities in our power. So what has France and Spain up to a point, they have increased the potestas. So right now, if a teacher says that a student has been misbehaving, that goes as a fact, which is not totally okay. I mean, things should be proved, or at least trying to be proved. But the Romans also have the autoritas. The autoritas is the respect you earn from your students, from your members, from your workers, from your soldiers.
Earning the respect.
And that is what these days we are not taking into account. So students should respect professors, not because they are the professors, but also because the professor is being straight with them. So many teachers believe that there's one thing they cannot say: I don't know. That to me is a deep mistake. Because let's be honest, the possibilities of facing something that you don't know these days are bigger than ever.
Yes.
So I think that if a student, it happens to me sometimes, they are undergraduate, but that means that sometimes they're even meaner. A student asks you something. So if you don't know, you don't know. You don't try to hide it. You don't try to pretend. You don't try to make up an answer. You say, I don't know, but let's find it out together. So let's see if we can make sense of this. I think this is something any young kid or young person can relate to.
Yes.
And that does not diminish the teacher. If anything, it makes them human. So I think that just because there's so many, let's say, crises happening, many teachers and professors found themselves in a very unstable position.
How is that?
Feeling challenged, feeling not backed enough. So that is a bad place to be. So that's why before I said the first thing, we must reinforce their training. That doesn't mean like we are doing in Spain, force them to study more years. No, it means that we must help them to study better. So maybe they do not need to invest so many years to learn content, but they need to be better at pedagogy. Maybe they need to learn more about psychology. Maybe they need to be more fluent with certain technologies. Training. Second, resources. Fortunately, that is the case everywhere. There are never enough resources for education. Which is kind of paradoxical because we like to say education is the foundation of the future of the society, and then we are stingy with it. So more resources should be poured, and also more research. So because of a study I've done on education, I've discovered that many things that are hold as certain are based only on ideology. So these kind of things should be exposed and should be corrected. So I think we should understand that children are children, but they are not stupid. And we should treat them with sometimes a little bit more of respect as well. Because just because they are small or young doesn't mean that they do not deserve.
Yes.
And finally, understand that education is not just the teacher's job. It takes the family, it takes the community to be involved. So, particularly in some Western places, it seems that they expect the teachers to solve all their education. So parents that are afraid to talk about sexual education, no, you do it at the school. Parents that are afraid to talk about certain political issues, no, you do it at the school. Well, no. The school should be able to talk about certain things without the fear of having a backlash. I don't think that it is okay what is happening right now in some states in the United States. They are banning books for no better reason that they supposedly contradict some ideological positions. That, to me, it's totally unacceptable. But families should also have a saying in that. I mean, it seems to me that many times parents are missing opportunities talking with the children, not just to educate them, but to build trust. Sometimes it seems to me that the one thing we are losing with all this situation is trust, and we end up trusting some obscure apps or groups or sources on the internet instead of the people we have around, no? So this is something that I think we should face, not with a concern or worried position, with an interest position. It's something that it should interest us, it should keep us busy. We should have a saying in these things and trying to find the ways to move forward together. Because probably nobody by its own will have the solution, but working together we can share. If we fail, we can distribute the responsibility and maybe find together a better option.
And it shows that the family institution and the education system itself is interrelated. And it should, because our behavior, right, we learn from other people, we adapt from what we see, from what we observe from the people around us. And who is the people around us? Our family. So it shows the how interrelated and importance of the family institution into the shaping of the children itself.
Of course.
And furthering to that, it recently happened on the 9th of September. It marks the United Nations International Day to protect education from attack. And in areas, the conflict-affected areas like Palestine, for example, and the issues like things that currently, prominently happen in the United States, the non-violence, right? And it shows how education systems are vulnerable to attacks and also damage. So how do such these disruptions happening, how these disruptions impact individual students and also the long-term development of post-normal civilizations itself?
Okay, there are several things here connected. The first thing is that violence in a school is absolutely unacceptable.
Yes.
It's horrific crime, and it should bring the condemn of everyone, no matter what. So I don't care if the parents of those children were the worst possible person. There's no acceptable justification for attacking a school.
Yes.
It's simply and plainly unacceptable. Another different thing is gun violence in the schools, which unfortunately this is something quite American. And in this regard, I have to say, I think American society is quite sick. I mean, that they are unable to protect their own children is something that it's beyond my understanding. Many years ago, there was also a gun attack. I think it was, I don't want to be wrong, but I think it was a Scottish school. So the United Kingdom government enforced new legislation, and that has never happened again in a British school. That is not happening in most schools anywhere.
So actually, there's a solution for it.
With guns, yes. The first time well, no, it was not the first time I was in Chicago. I was so shocked to see at the entrance of schools and universities no guns allowed and have to pass beyond an arc detector, a metal detector. I thought, dear God, this is it shocked me to the core. I mean, the fact that school cannot be a safe space for children is something that I don't understand. But then there's a second kind of violence, psychological violence and bullying. This is something that concerns me a lot, because if you navigate a little bit social networks, many times it's a kind of behavior that somehow seems to trigger viral responses, which I find it awful. For me, it's also an indication that we are not dealing properly with post-normal times. So there's something eating up some of our young people. I even see it in my students. The number of students of mine with mental health issues has grown, particularly after COVID.
Yes.
That has grown a lot. So that tells me that there's something deeper we need to look at. But school should be a place free of violence.
Yes.
And that a society is unable to achieve that. It tells me that this society is not in very good shape, because there are many societies that they are doing a good job at this. So I remember many years ago I was visiting an island in the Philippines. It was a very modest island. I would pass through villages that some of the houses wouldn't even have glass in the windows. But invariably the best building in every village was the school.
The school, wow.
Was the tallest and the biggest. And if coming back, I got the time kids were getting out of the school, and they were all getting out in these incredibly white shirts that they looked like pristine even after class. And I thought, these people is taking seriously education. So I'm sure there are things that can be improved, but that they were making sure that school was the best building they could have, that kids were there, because there were no kids in the street during class hours. In other countries of the world, for instance, I've traveled in South America, in some places you see lots of kids during class time. Poor kids, of course.
And you're not going to school.
That was not happening in the Philippines. And I thought, these people have an idea, have a vision of the future. They are investing in education. It can be better, it can be worse. But that effort, I thought it was absolutely commendable. And that in other places, parents are scared that their kids may be shot. So really bizarre things like backpacks with bulletproof sides, panic rooms at the school. Are we that crazy, really? I think that maybe it's not the right word to say. Fortunately or luckily, this only happens in the United States. Another thing is what is happening in places like Palestine and Ukraine. This is because madmen are targeting children and schools for very wrong reasons. But that is not acceptable as well.
And I would like to go back just for a while. You mentioned about now that we're approaching the future where there's been lacking of the educators. Is it because of they are no longer enjoy teaching just as much as some kids nowadays? They no longer enjoy learning?
I don't think it is the case. I cannot talk for many places, but I can talk for Catalonia, the place I've been researching. Studies show that they reach schools full of hopes, dreams, ideas and projects. That many of them, after the 5th year or before, leave. That is the thing. So, in my country, for instance, what is happening is that teachers are facing a complexity they are not ready for. You have to think that in the place where I live, we have gone from 6 million to 8.5 in less than 20 years because of immigration. So in some places, immigrants are more than 30-40% of the population. And many of them come with kids, and kids get immediately into a school. Sometimes they don't speak the language. So that is an added difficulty for teachers, and they are not always given the tools or the resources to deal with it. On top of that, you probably are aware that racism and xenophobia is sweeping Europe. There's a crisis there. It's not as bad as the 2008 financial crisis, but that has created a soil that it's fertile for this kind of xenophobic ideas, which are absolutely wrong and false. I mean, like saying that immigrants take local jobs. That's not true. I bet it's the same here. Immigrants get the jobs the locals no longer want to do. So they are not taking top jobs. They get in the market bottom up. And when you cannot find locals to do certain jobs, like going to the fields and picking the fruits, you get immigrants. Another one in education is that those schools with higher percentage of children from fathers of foreign origin, let's say this way, the performance is lower. But you see, performance has nothing to do with the national origin of the parents, because there's a part of Catalonia where all the rich people live, where all the foreign schools are, and also the football players, let's be honest. And there, the children of the foreign people do better than the locals. So what does have an influence on the performance of the children is the socio-cultural, economic level of the parents. So, of course, if you are a very modest family that comes from the Maghreb or sub-Saharan countries, that the parents didn't really have an opportunity to learn, they cannot help their children. So the children do worse, but they do as bad as any local family whose family are in the same conditions. So it's class, not as national origin.
That's interesting.
But because, you see, and forgive me if I get a little bit too carried away, but it's something that really rages me. The problem is not that they are foreign. The problem is the country they are from. So we have also this label nowadays in Spain, expat. So people, foreigners that come to work, most of times they carry the work with them, like digital nomads and the likes. People that many times make a lot of money, they also create a lot of problems, but there's no xenophobia against them. Xenophobia is against the people from Africa, people from Asia, or people from South America. So that is something that the school cannot solve, but the school cannot be held responsible. So I have all the admiration for those teachers that are there in the classroom trying to help all their students regardless of their origin. And that is something that it's going to happen more and more in my part of the world, because the locals are getting old, our fertility rate is incredibly low, and either we find the ways to welcome these people or we are doomed. But that's something that exceeds the context of education, I'm afraid.
So actually it goes beyond than that. And as we are reaching the end of this conversation, I would like to leave you with one last question about your personal vision of the education system in the future.
Well, I think is what I said before, a system that puts the children at the center and that it's focused on learning. Seem very simple things, but they lead to very deep changes.
And with that being said, I would like to thank Mr. Jordi Serra del Pino, who is the Deputy Director of the Center for Postnormal Policy and Future Studies. And we hope that today's conversation, today's sharing will be beneficial and also giving you an insight about the education system in the future. And again, Mr. Serra, thank you for being with us in the studio.
Has been my honor.
And for you listeners, if you would like to leave some comments or share your thoughts on today's conversation, you can leave it on our social media pages, Facebook and YouTube. So be sure to tune in to us next week for more conversations. Stay tuned to Kim FM.